Oh, hi everyone. I hope you're having an awesome day so far, and thank you so much for your time today. Also, don't forget to thank your Market Center leaderships for bringing these amazing classes to you. If you can turn your cameras on, that would be great so that the instructor can see all of your amazing faces. By the way, I am Jules, VA for FES in chat. Please message me through Zoom with any questions throughout the class. And if you have some questions to our instructor about this class, you can simply type it in our chat box or you can raise your digital hand so the instructor can notice you and entertain your questions. So, welcome everyone. You're in Shift with John Morris. This class will run for 3 hours and it's a two-part class. So, the second part will be tomorrow, July 13, and we'll be having the same time. And you can use the same link to join for tomorrow's session. There's a lot more things to know and learn in part two, so don't miss it out and jump off on time. So I'll be putting the link of the class material in our chat box, so please check it out. Also, this class is recorded and we will send the recording out on Thursday with both parts in all registrants, and it will be available to view for 30 days. Please email me at fes@floridaeducationalservices.com or chat@chattimonline.com if you do not receive it. So that's it, guys. Please enjoy the rest of the class. And now let me introduce to you our awesome instructor for today's class. He has exceptional leadership skills and a background in education. He has a passion for education and helping real estate professionals unlock their potential. During his career in real estate, he has been a sales agent, an REO agent, CDPE certified short sale agent, technology coordinator, technology ambassador, director of training and technology, productivity coach, trainer, and a sales manager. With his wide range of experience, he is a sought after speaker as he can cover several topics in real estate from multiple perspectives and markets. He serves as area director for the Maryland or DC region. He is a broker associate with the Keller Williams offices in Santa Cruz and Tracy, California. In addition, he serves as a labs advisor, a CHATS or FES and SES instructor, technology consultant to several market centers, is a national trainer, and is on the KW Northern California or Hawaii Regional Technology Leadership Council. So let's welcome our very amazing instructor for today, John Morris. Take it away, John.
All right, before we get started, and that was a mouthful, can you please enable the screen sharing for myself? That
Well
way I
done.
can make sure that I share the screen. Awesome. All right, so enough about me. Let's get into the topic of today, which is the Shift One Day Workshop. It's actually made a 2-day workshop because when I was talking with FES and chat about this, I was like, hey, let's not punish anybody and put them through 6 hours worth of Zoom because I don't think anybody has the bandwidth, at least anymore, for being on Zoom all day like that. So this will actually be a 2-day workshop. We will cover today basically the first 2 chapters of this of the topics here, which is the first one, kind of getting into the right mindset of going through a shift, and then the second part of it is basically getting our lead generation activities to match a shift. So we're going to go probably for about an hour, hour and a half, and then we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and then we'll motor through the last hour and a half or so to get into the second part of this as well too. So that's a little bit about today. Introductions. Got an introduction with me there, just really quickly because I know that was a mouthful. I've been through the last market shift, was able to survive through that. Actually, probably the most profitable part of my career when I was in production was during that last market shift. And we'll talk a little bit about that, not necessarily my personal stuff, although I'll throw some of that in there. But I think that a lot of us right now are just thinking, or we're hearing this, and maybe we haven't been through a shift before, and we're thinking, oh my gosh, the sky's falling, everything's bad, awful. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter what market we're in. When we say shift, it's really just market correction, right? And the markets are always shifting. The markets are always correcting up or down one way or the other. And there's business to be found in all of those. So we'll talk a little bit about that. What I do want to do to kind of get some feedback back from you guys is looking at in the chat box, looking at some of these questions. I want you guys to just introduce yourselves so that we know kind of who's in the class today. So if you don't mind, let's take about a minute or two, and I want you to put in who you are, right? What your role is in your organization. Are you in leadership? Are you an agent? How long you've been in real estate or how long you've been licensed? What was your production like in the last year or so? And then one thing that you hope to learn by being in the workshop today. And if you're new and you didn't close anything last year, you don't need to worry about answering that question. You're just new and you hope to learn how to, really get into, navigating this shift here, right? So it looks like we got some people from Miami here today. I know we got more than one person here. I see 92 participants on the screen here. So let's take a look at and see who we got here. We got some people from Florida. I know I've seen some people from Northern California that I know on here as well too. 12 years, I've been through a shift before, Lynn, so you can provide some good feedback for us. Kyle, right in my neck of the woods here. I live in Ripon, so I'm about 5 minutes away from Kyle's office here. Miami, 14 years. So Jen has seen some shifts too. All right. Dylan coming from Miami. We got a lot of Miami people going in. Deanna, 18 years. You've been through the shift as well. We've got San Francisco, Audrey in Lodi. Newer to the world and hasn't seen a shift. Sarasota. Jennifer Anderson. I have a cousin named Jennifer Anderson. Tampa Bay. Okay. We've got some people from Hawaii all over the place. Cool. So it looks like we've got a pretty eclectic mix here of people in the group. Some people that are newer that haven't been through a shift, some people that are experienced and have been through a shift as well too. One of the things that I always like to do is make sure that you go through that chat log and see if there's people in areas where you might be sending some referral business, or maybe you want to do some referral business, because it's really cool when you come to a class and somebody says, hey, I got a referral for Miami, and we've got a lot of Miami agents here. So I see my buddy Patrick Gill, he's actually on here. He's been in business 24 years and he's a guru. So he could probably come on here and help me teach this class. So Patrick, I'm gonna probably be picking on you during the course of the class as well too. All right, a couple things real fast as far as some ground rules before we get started. No question's a dumb question. Make sure you ask the questions if you have any. You can do that in a couple of ways. I'd love for you guys to speak up and participate. That way it's not me talking all the time. It's always more fun when you have conversations with people. So raise your digital hand, and basically that you can do at the bottom. If you aren't seeing how to raise your digital hand, there's the 3 dots that say more. And then when you go into that, you should be able to go in and raise your hand that you have a question to ask. Or you could just unmute yourself and say, hey, John, I have a question, as far as that goes too. And then you can also, if you feel a little bit shy and don't want to talk, just ask it in the chat box as well too. So if you have questions, make sure that you feel free to do that. Other thing is it's great to be able to see people. So if you can kind of make sure that you turn your camera on, it's always good to see your friendly faces as well too. Okay, awesome. All right, doesn't look like there's any questions so far. So let's just kind of jump into it, right? So if we look at the first slide, it basically just shows the signs of a shift. And what do we know? For those of you that have been in this before, what are some signs that we typically start to see when we know that the market is going to correct from a seller's market to a buyer's market? And that's the kind of the frame or the phrase that I want to use here is not so much shift, but again, how are we going from a seller's market to a buyer's market? What are some signs that we typically see? And we got some shy people. Rates, okay, rising interest rates. dropping buyer demand. So rates in itself, I would say, yeah, we've got to pay attention to those things. But what do the high rates do? And make no mistake about it. Right now is in order to curb inflation, right? One of the tools, basically, there's two tools that our government has to curb inflation. One is to change policy or to change law. That's really kind of hard to do, right? Because we have to write a new law, we have to, present it, we have to put it up for votes, we have to get it voted in. It can take a long period of time, and it's challenging, right? So, in order to curb inflation, changing law is a little bit tough. The other tool that our government has to use in order to curb inflation is rising interest rates, because raising rates does what? What's the purpose of raising? Why do we want to raise rates, or why does the government want to raise rates? Because yeah, Claudius is bringing prices down. It increases costs, which basically does what? If we basically increase costs, what happens to our buyer pool? Okay, buyers start leaving the market, right? And if buyers start leaving the market, what happens? Demand starts going down. And if demand goes down, what goes up? Supply, right? And if supply goes up and demand goes down, what happens to the prices? Gets the prices under control, which that's really what the government is hoping for right now. Because ultimately, if we look at where we're at in society, is that inflation is really high. It's out of control, right? And one of the dangers, and it doesn't, and I don't mean to politicize this at all, but if we look at both sides of the coin, it doesn't matter if you're Democratic or Republican, right? Is that both parties will agree that the number one concern that we have as a society when it comes to democracy is out of control inflation. Because what happens when inflation gets out of control? The middle class gets squeezed even further down, and it's harder for them to buy. And then the only ones that can buy when prices are really high are the people who have the money. So it throws the balance of equality out. So it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. Both parties will agree that that's the number one threat to a democratic society is high inflation. So both sides are going to vote to do whatever we can to kind of curb that and prevent that, right? And the tool that we have, again, or that they have, is increasing rates. So they're going to keep increasing rates until people stop buying stuff, right? So how do we then kind of go out and maximize our ability to be able, and then I know as an agent, you guys are sitting there thinking, wait a minute, people stop buying stuff. How am I going to sell anything? There's going to be deals that are going to be out there, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, seeing high mortgage rates, we know that that's going to eventually turn into a buyer's market, because buyers are going to pull out, and which is going to force sellers to basically cut down on their prices as well too. Now, looking at that other bullet point up there, and we talked about this a little bit, in a buyer's market, what tends to happen to home prices? We just talked about this, right? What's going to happen to home prices? They flatten out, or they maybe reduce a little bit, right? Now, we don't know where that's going to go. In a lot of our markets right now, and let's see some feedback in the chat. Are you guys in your markets right now typically seeing decreased prices, or are they flattening out? Just curious. So we have a lot of different markets on here. So Claudia says decrease, flattening out. We got a little bit of both, flatten out. And that's what's typically what we're starting to see in a lot of markets right now, is more of a flattening. Now, some people are sitting there saying, hey, we're seeing a lot more price reductions, but the price reductions are a little bit different than actually a decrease. Because let's just say, for example, the market before, right? Let's just say the market before, and hold on a second, I want to change my camera here for a second. So we're going to stop the share. And I want to go into a different screen share here. Give me 1 second. All right, let me pull my background off. So let's see here, background, I want none. There we go. All right, so give you the example that I'm talking about, right? So if we say, for example, that, and let me make this bigger. So if we say 400, and let me pull the light down just a little bit so you guys can see that a little bit better. All right, there we go. So if we just say that 400K is typically what we've been selling, right? For, and now, prices listing wise are up to 450K, right? But then we find that they're actually going into contract at 400K, right? Now, this is not, and this is what we're seeing in most markets, right? We're not necessarily seeing a price decline. Agents are just trying to keep pushing the sales prices up, and they're not going up, but they're actually kind of staying the same. So, and I know in some markets, we actually are seeing that the prices are declining a little bit. But I know a lot of the markets that we're looking at right now, it's more of a situation where, hey, you know what? Prices before we were listing at 375K and we were selling at 400K. And then now we're basically listing at 450K or 425K, and then they're coming back down to 4. So it's not that the prices have actually fallen, they're just stabilizing. So we've got to make sure as we're looking at that, we pay attention to are they actually really falling, or are they just are they stabilizing? Okay. So looking at some of the comments here, we're seeing some people decreasing, some people again saying flat. Same here, a lot more inventory. Yeah, definitely seen inventory increase quite a bit in some cases. Now, if I'm looking at, because I'm a MAPS coach as well, and talking to a lot of my clients that I have, that's what we're really seeing across the board. And make sure that I want you guys to put your numbers in the chat box as well too. One of the things that I'm typically seeing right now or hearing right now, so I have a client, a MAPS client that is in Arkansas, and he said that 3 months ago they were at an all-time low on inventory, and they were sitting somewhere around 440. This month they're at 1,600, right? Had another client that a year ago their market was sitting at 6,000 on the homes on the MLS. Now they're at 16,000 homes on the MLS. What are you guys seeing in your markets? Are we seeing inventory increases like that, or is it holding stable? Just some comments in the chat box, or unmute yourself if you feel like talking. Okay. So we see Janet says we had 63 listings and on April 2022, and today we have 193. So you guys have almost tripled, right? Inventory increasing, seeing a lot of that. Jenny says that there's tripled in 2 months. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of situations where we're seeing a tripling in inventory, and that's definitely a sign too. So those are some things that we need to pay attention to as we kind of take a look at what's going on in our markets. Is mortgage rates are going to typically mean that stuff's going to shift, right? Buyers are going to pull out, and that's going to increase inventory. Inventory is increasing. Inventory, even if it hasn't happened yet, we get too high of inventory, homeowners need to sell. In order to sell, they're going to have to price more aggressively, and that should have some issues on home prices. Tax reform can also come into play here too. So if we see people, if the government makes things more tax friendly, right? Why do they typically make things more tax friendly? To increase what? We've just gotten a lot of stimulus things over the last couple of years. What is that meant to do? Buying, right? Now, if we went in buying, spending, all that kind of stuff. Typically, though, the government right now, do they want people to buy, or do they want people to not buy? We just talked a little bit about this. Do we want people to buy or not buy? Not buy. Okay, right? Because ultimately, again, if the buying spree continues, then inflation keeps getting out of whack. So the government wants people to stop buying so that the prices get back under more control, right? And yeah, we had a little bit of overstimulation there. So what do we expect in terms of tax reform right now? Are we going to get tax benefits or tax breaks? Probably not, because they're not going to want to stimulate the economy. They're going to want to kind of pull that back. So we need to pay attention to those things as well too. Okay. Any questions on that? All right, so if we take a look at this first activity, and if you're kind of following along in your workbooks, we should be on page, or roughly page, yeah, we should be on page 10, right? So what I want you guys to do, and I'm going to kind of put you guys into groups of, what do we got here? Let me see, make sure that I can put you guys into groups. Yep, I can set out breakout rooms. So I'm going to create some breakout rooms. We have basically 120 on here. So I'm going to create about 30 different breakout rooms. So there's groups of about 4. And what I want you guys to do is the activity that's on page 10. So you're going to work with your partners to write a list of top 10 types of buyers and sellers you've worked with in the past, who are your clients, right? And so if we look at what I'm talking about here is what kinds of buyers do we have? We have first-time home buyers. We have move-up buyers. We have investors, right? So think about the types of buyers that you have. Same thing with sellers, right? We have investors that we work with, potentially builders that we work with, traditional sellers, first-time sellers, corporate sellers, those types of things. So I want you to list your top 10 types of buyers and sellers that you've worked with in the past. And then I want you to then think about what are the motivations and concerns that each buyer and seller may be affected by on the current shift. So if I'm thinking about all the different types of buyers that I've worked with over the last, last couple of years, and I think of all the different kinds of sellers that I worked with, if I was a buyer and a seller in that market right now, what would I be thinking about? What would be concerning to me, right? If I'm a buyer, man, I might be really concerned about where rates are going. This is going to affect my affordability. So think about what those concerns might be. And then we're obviously not in a live classroom, so we can't do all of the things that are on here. So we're not going to place sticky notes on the wall. But then I want you guys, after you bring your list of concerns down, whittle that down to about your top 5. So looking at the top 5 buyer and seller concerns that you have, what would those be, right? And then think about, do the current lead generation efforts that you do align with that? So in other words, if I sit there and say, for example, I've really worked with a lot of first-time home buyers, and I'm going to just give you some examples. We'll walk you through, right? So maybe one of the lists of buyers that I have is first-time home buyers, right? Okay, great. What motivations or concerns might a first-time home buyer have right now? Well, obviously interest rates, because if interest rates go too high, then I might not be able to afford the payment, right? I might be worried about job, because as we go into a different economy and when inflation is going a little bit higher, my affordability might be a little bit down. I might have some concerns about my jobs, things like that, right? Now, question number 3 says, work with your partners to place the notes on the wall in order from most motivated to least motivated on a transaction. How motivated are they? If I am a first-time home buyer, how motivated am I maybe potentially in the current environment? What do you guys think? Maybe not very motivated, because prices are super high and right now rates are going up. So if my predominant book of business has been on first-time home buyers, right, going into this next market, am I going to have a tough time as an agent? Probably so, because this is not really at least the current market right now is not great for first-time home buyers, because we got high prices and rates are up, right? So if I'm going to try to make my business off of that segment, that might be a little bit tough. So I got to think about, in terms of the types of buyers and sellers that I have, who are going to be the most motivated. Now, to flip that, right now, who might be somebody that's really motivated? I'm going to do a stare down contest with you guys. Okay, cool. So we got some investors. So investors probably are because, hey, you know what? I just bought this flip and prices are probably going to go down. I want to get out as fast as I can. Or builders. I got three houses left in my subdivision. I want to get out while the getting's good. Or I saw somebody on there putting second homeowners in the chat box. Hey man, inflation's going up, stuff's getting to be unaffordable. My boss isn't letting me work remotely anymore. I probably should sell my house in the mountains because I got to actually get back into the office. So, and I want to do so before stuff gets too out of whack. So make sure that you're thinking about, as we go through this activity, who are going to be the who out of my lists that I have, who's going to be really motivated, who's not going to be motivated, right? And then as we have that top 5, and that's what we want to do is let's list out who are the top 5 motivated buyers or sellers that we could be working with right now. And then how might we market to those people? Because if I'm thinking, you guys all said it, you guys all said investors. Now, if I'm buying internet leads from Zillow, I'm probably not getting investors from there. I might be able to, but is the lead generation activities that I'm doing matching with what those motivated buyers or sellers, matching with what's going to get me with those motivated buyers or sellers? Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is, again, this list here, it's in your workbook, right? What I want you guys to do, and again, this is page 10. You're going to list out your top 10 buyers or sellers that you could be working with right now, okay? And then I want you to write down, as you're working in your groups, what would be the lead generation efforts that you could do in order to get more of those types of buyers and sellers, okay? All right, so again, we have 110 in the group right now in the group. So let me take a look here and see if we can distribute this a little bit more equally. That is, if we do 110 divided by 30 groups, I'll put about 3 to 4 people in each one of the groups, okay? So I'm gonna put you guys in the breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of have some, I want each one of the groups to kind of come out with what they came up with. So I'm going to put you guys in for about 10 minutes right now. Okay, you guys have all been invited to a breakout room. Coming back. All right. We'll give a couple minutes here for everybody to hop back in. We're seeing the numbers go back up. We should be just about ready, or everybody should just about be back now. All right. So let's not be shy. What were some of these, who are the motivators? So if we're looking at right now, and if we're trying to give some advice to ourselves and to other agents, who are the motivated buyers and sellers? What did you guys come up with?
I'd say, my name is Allison. I'd say empty nesters, like they need to downsize.
Empty nesters could be some motivated people. Hey, you know what? I got a lot of equity in my house. Maybe I don't need to worry about, a lot of that stuff in terms of, I don't need to worry about rates to go buy and downsize, because the big house I own, I can sell cash, or I could sell it and then go pay cash for the smaller house, right? So I think empty nesters is a really good one. Now, let me ask you this, Allison. You said that empty nesters, how did your group determine how might we go about doing lead generation to empty nesters?
Like go
Go ahead.
Yeah, go search for it. Work with the title company and look for empty nesters to see, where they are in the area.
Right. A good one is, like you said, title companies. Who owns who's been in the house for 20 years? Who owns the house out? Who owns houses outright? Right. Those are good. Those are good ways to look. Next up, I see you with a raised hand, Emmy. What did you guys come up with for a motivated?
We talked about first-time home buyers because the rents are going up and people's leases are coming to an end and their rent is being raised like $500 at, for the next interval. So
Okay,
we
so
see that
now
a
here's
lot.
the thing, right, Emmy, and we got to look at this too, is we, right before the break, we said, right, that maybe first-time home buyers might not be really good right now because stuff's still kind of unaffordable and rates are going up. Does that mean there's no options for first-time home buyers? Not really.
It doesn't mean
what,
that there's no options. It's just a limited, and the limits are based on their credit, their preparedness for the market.
well, let me ask you this, right? If rates go up, can we get a cheaper rate for our buyers?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, how?
they can
They
buy
can
down
buy
the
down
rate.
the rate.
They
Right.
could buy down the rate. Who else could buy down the rate for me, especially if it turns into a buyer's market?
The seller take that on.
Yeah. Instead of asking, 'cause typically we ask for closing costs from the seller. What does this look? Instead of closing costs, hey, we want you to buy down the rate so that it makes it a little bit more affordable. What was one of the tools that everybody got afraid of last time around, because that's really caused the market to collapse last time, was ARMs, right? Are ARMs necessarily a bad thing? Gary just talked about this on his top 100 call, right? What's not probably very good, which caused a lot of problems during the last market shift, is we saw interest-only ARMs that reset after about 3 years. In a 3-year period, if the market tanks, do we really have time for the market to basically get back so that we aren't upside down? Probably not. If we get into a 7-year ARM, though, or if we basically advise our clients on a 7-year ARM, and it allows them to get the rate they need to buy the house that they want to get, if values do fall, will we probably see a recovery within 7 years? Most likely, right? And so that's what Gary was really talking about on his top agent call a couple weeks ago, is we don't necessarily need to be afraid of ARMs. We just need to know how to use them. Because again, if we look at a short-term ARM, yeah, that's bad, especially as the market's going down. But if we look at a longer-term ARM that allows us to get the rate we want, and now the buyer has time, if the values do decline, for the market to recover, so that if the rates do reset, they can either sell the house and have equity to get out, or maybe the rates get back into alignment or drop down a little bit more, and now we can refinance out of those things as well too. Right. So thanks, Emmy. Edward, what did you guys come up with as your top motivated buyer or seller?
So we talked about people who transfer a lot. I'm blessed to be in Miami, and we've had a lot of people come down here, even though they work remotely. And we also have a lot of corporations that are shifting to come down here, and so they start bringing their employees little by little. So one of our targets or ideas was to hit up HR departments and see how many people they're bringing. Can we service some of them, all of them? Give us a chance with one or whatever, and we'll take it from there. And then once you get in, then you talk to those employees, make sure they have a great experience, and then you don't necessarily need the HR departments, because you get referrals from within the company.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really smart, because ultimately you have those people that have to move because I got a new job or I'm being transferred someplace, right? So, and I think I have a client in my region. I'm area director for the Keller Williams, Maryland, DC region. And one of his entire book of business has been built on working with school districts and HR companies to basically provide kind of like a benefit resource to those corporations or those entities. So he goes in and does workshops, and he goes in and does presentations for them as a added benefit for their workplaces. And it's allowed him to grow a massive business. So what does it look like, doing what Edward had suggested, and then reaching out to school districts, reaching out to big employers in our area to kind of be their benefit person. They all have their benefit person for retirement and life insurance and medical insurance. Well, what does it look like if we're their representative for real estate, especially if they're sending out people and bringing in people a lot? Okay, cool. Last one, Janet, what did you guys come up with?
Well, just to elaborate a little bit on the empty nesters and reaching out to the title companies and seeing homes that are 3,500 square feet or larger with swimming pools and they've been there 10 to 15 years, odds are their kids have graduated, moved on, they are looking to downsize. So I'm micro focusing on that. And then another one that was suggested was luxury apartments. Focusing on luxury apartments that's paying astronomical rents and showing them, that they could pay their mortgage instead of rent.
Yeah, and that was one of the things Gary had brought up too, and that we need to get really good at as we're having to have these conversations with people is, right now, have rates gone up? Yeah, rates have gone up. But he did an exercise, and I think that it would be good if all of us did something like this. Is Gary did an exercise with us, and he showed that if say somebody bought a house in 2015, and they bought the example that he gave is they bought a house in 2015 for $350,000. And I think this market was like Austin. In the market in Austin, that house today that they bought for $350 is now worth like $650. And based on what they've paid down on the house and the equity they had, I think Gary showed the example of having somewhere about $300,000 of equity if they were to sell that house right now. And then what he showed beyond that was, okay, this person now wants to buy a $750,000 house. They have $300,000 to put down. And then he showed different options for that buyer in purchasing a $750,000 house. So he showed one that was like a rate for a traditional 30-year fixed. He showed one with a rate that the seller, they asked the seller credit for a point buy down, and they did one at what the current rates are for a 7-year ARM. And then basically what it showed in this spreadsheet that Gary had put together was that, if you go to the 30-year fixed, based on the old $350,000 mortgage that the person had, the difference in price payment between that $350 at 2015 rates and $750, or actually $450 after you put the $300,000 down, $450 at 2022 rates, right, was I think $500-600 more expensive, which we expect that anyway because we're buying a $750,000 house versus buying that $350 that we had bought before. And then he showed what the payment was on a 7/1 ARM, and the 7/1 ARM, I think it showed something along the lines of it was now $300 more expensive, right? And then he showed one where they bought the rate down by 1%, or the seller asking the seller to buy the rate down by 1%, and the 1% rate down made the house payment like $150-200 more expensive. And when he showed that to the group of top 100 agents, a lot of them, especially the ones that hadn't been through a shift before, were really, really shocked in the sense where it's like, yeah, the payment's gone up a little bit, but it's not as drastic, or it's not as end of the world as we typically think that it might be, right? So working with your what I'm really suggesting a lot of people do right now is work with your lenders and find out, hey, what does the 7/1 ARM look like for people? What does it look like for buyers if we get a point buy down, right? And then what does a 30-year fix look like? And if you get those numbers out, it might not surprise you on how bad it actually is, right? We got one more from Kai.
Hello. One thing that we did discuss was probate.
Mhm.
So reaching out to probate sellers through marketing yourself and reaching out to attorneys.
Yeah, I think that's really smart because ultimately, I mean, unfortunately, people pass and those houses need to be sold in a lot of cases. And in those probate instances, the houses will continue to sell until, or they'll continue to make the price more aggressive until they sell, right? Okay, cool. Any other questions on that? Really, really important as we kind of go into this, and this is what Gary always talks about, a Wayne Gretzky quote, and I'll end this section on that, is Wayne Gretzky always said, you skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck's at now. And that's, I think, as we head into a shifting market, we need to constantly be thinking, where is the market going to go and who's going to buy and sell in that market? Not to, hey, where are the buyers and sellers right now? Because if we go to where the buyers and sellers are right now, by the time that we get them, they're going to be in a different spot, right? And my MAPS clients, that's one of the things that we're going over with them right now is, again, who's insulated from interest rates? That it doesn't matter if rates go to 20%. Well, cash buyers cash buyers aren't going to be affected by rates. Who are those people? A lot of times they're investors, they're new home builders. Well, how are we marketing to get those new home builders and new investors? What relationships are we developing with banks on potentially getting REO listings? And are we looking at, say, for example, who has bought homes in the last year to 18 months that aren't going to have equity, that if they have to sell, might be an option for a short sale, right? So think about where that puck's going to be at, not where it's at now. Awesome. All right, let me share my screen here real fast, and then we'll hop into the next part of this. All right. So the other thing that when we look at the signs of a shift, the things we need to look at is the economics, and we talked about those: mortgage rates, home prices, tax reform. Now what we got to think about is, okay, last activity, and I'm not going to break you guys out here. We'll just do this together. Last activity, we talked about who are the people who might buy or who might be motivated as the market shifts. Now we got to think about ourselves, right? And what I mean by thinking about ourselves is, what values do we provide versus our competitors? And this is on page 12 if you're kind of following along in your books, right? Because ultimately, let's look at it like this and be honest. How hard was it to sell houses over the last 2 years? And I'm not talking about from a buyer's agent perspective, because we know that that was really hard because you were competing with 20 other offers. As a listing agent, how hard was it to sell houses over the last 2 years?
Piece of cake.
What was that?
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake, right? I mean, my 15-year-old daughter could have probably sold a house, because what do you got to do? Put it on the MLS. Realistically, not that I would do this, but we know, and not that any KW agent would do this, because we know that KW agents are the best, right? But as an agent, if I was really, really bad, could I have gotten away with, over the last 2 years, listing somebody's property and only putting it on the MLS and doing nothing else?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, because I put it on the MLS in 48 hours without me making a flyer, without me holding an open house, without me pricing it right? I got 20 offers, $50,000 over list price, and I'm making money, right? Now, a great market covers our flaws as agents. What does a shifted market do?
Exposes them.
It exposes every flaw that we have, right? And so that's what I want to talk about here right now on page 12, is thinking about, all right, what do our competitors offer? And then what do I offer, right? So what are some things in your guys' market out there? And you can either unmute yourself and talk, or you can put it into the chat. What are some things that your competitors might offer right now that you don't?
I'd say maybe staging.
Okay, so some of our competitors might offer staging, lower percentage, buying their homes, free moving trucks,
Home warranties.
home warranties. So think about it like that. And let's just kind of go there. We had somebody said lower percentage, which I'm assuming you mean lower commission rate. We don't want to lower our commission rate. So even though somebody might lower their commission rate, there's ways that we could talk about or talk around that doesn't necessarily deal with a shift. So let's kind of go into some of the other ones real fast. So if we look at buying their homes, is there anybody on here that can't get a cash offer for a house? I'm not seeing anybody say anything. But even if you're not working with investors, if you could get a seller to go to an attractive price, is there anybody that couldn't get an investor to buy that cash?
I am working with a lender who gives us the opportunity to be a cash buyer, even though they are actually still going to be able to get a mortgage on it. But the program that he uses allows them to do that. So that puts them in the arena with cash buyers, whether they're investor or they're just, another person who's trying to get into a property.
Well, I'm not even talking about the cash buyers in terms of that. I'm talking, which that's great, because now that allows me to be more competitive. But I'm saying from a listing standpoint, if you were to go on a listing presentation, could all of you guys offer to buy that house for cash? Because I know that was one of the things that popped up is our competitors sometimes are saying that they could buy the house for cash. And I just saw somebody put yes with Keller Offers, which is great, right? So if you're not familiar with Keller Offers, make sure that you reach out to your team leader to get some information on Keller Offers, because that allows us to make cash offers on properties. In addition to that, and Ginny asked the question, what's that? Keller Offers is basically an entity kind of like iBuyers, but through Keller Williams, that allows us to go in there and for a price, be able to make a cash offer to our sellers. But even if you didn't use Keller Offers, right? All of us probably know agents in our market center that know investors. And we just need to find out what the numbers are. And what I mean by that is, think about it like this. If I go on a listing appointment and a house is worth $400,000, if I could get the seller to agree to list it at $300,000, do you think that I could find a cash offer for that tomorrow or today?
Sure.
Yeah, undoubtedly you probably can, because even if you don't have an investor, somebody in your market center has an investor. And so that's where I think even if somebody's advertising that's where we can compete with those people, at least on that one, is we can go out there and make a cash offer on somebody's property, because that's all those investors are doing anyway. They're not sitting there guaranteeing that I'm going to get you a market value or an offer on your house at market value. They're guaranteeing you that they're going to get you an offer based on their rate.
De repente la vegetariana.
We need to somebody needs to go on mute.
Sí.
Okay, cool. So that's basically, we can compete with that in the sense that, hey, we just reach out to all the agents in our market center. Are you working in investors? If I brought your investor a deal that was, 20 or 30, or find out whatever that number is at for the investors. Let's just say that their numbers, hey, I want deals that are 25% under market value. Awesome. So if I could bring you a deal that the house was worth 4 and the seller would sell it for you at 3, would you buy it? Yeah, right. So we can compete on that. What else was in here as well too? We talked about free moving trucks, right? If you listed your house with me, how much is it going to cost me for a moving truck? How much would it cost me to get a U-Haul?
$30 a day.
How much?
$30 a day.
30 bucks a day. So how hard would it be for you to sit there and say, hey, listen, I'll give you $100 voucher for, or $100 card for, or whatever for a U-Haul, $100 credit for a U-Haul at the close of escrow, right? Could you offer that same thing? You don't need to have your own truck, right? So you can offer that as well too. We talked about buying your homes already. Buy the house if the house doesn't sell in 60 days. Paying for closing costs, rebate for new construction. Those are all things that we could potentially offer credits for. We see market education. Okay, cool. So we talked about competitors. Now think about you for instance. What are some values? And again, going back to page 12, what's value that you provide to your clients that nobody else can? What's some things that you can do besides the things we talked about?
I have a thought. Somebody mentioned in my office, hey, would you like me to go back to my office and share this, let the 400 people in my office know about your property that's for sale? Or would you like me to go back to my office and tell my 400 agents that I work with that, you're looking for a particular home?
Yeah, if you have a big market center and you're the biggest kid in town, that's definitely some power there. Right. In addition to, especially if you know where buyers and sellers are coming from, and we have, and if you're competing, one of your top competitors is a local indie, and we have a network of agents that are almost 200,000 throughout the United States. And if I live in an area where let's just say that I live in a military area, Washington called Anacortes had a massive influx all the time of people in the Navy because there was a Naval Air Force station about 20 miles away from Anacortes. And so kind of using that as an example, right? If I know that people are coming in and out a lot, that's important because now I go to that seller and I say, hey, listen, you know from being here that we get a lot of people moving in from the Navy. We have 819 market centers across the United States, many of them in military locations. And I have a network of lots of people I can reach out to that might be moving in to help market your house, right? So making sure that we're using some of the things that we have to our advantage are really good. What are some other things that we might be able to provide to our sellers? Hey, a dog walker while you have an open house for a showing. I like that one, right? Thinking outside the box. What are some things that we can do that nobody else is doing out there right now? You got dogs. They're going to be a nuisance while people are doing your house. We're going to do scheduled showings, and I'll have a dog walker there during the scheduled showings to get the dog out of the house. Cool.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Something else that Keller Mortgage does now in a lot of markets, Keller Concierge, which allows you to make updates or repairs to properties so that then they become more desirable when they do hit the market.
Yeah, so Keller does have some of the concierge services where you're able to potentially get the house updated and get market ready, which is going to be important because in the market that we just came out of, you can be a really ugly house and still sell. But as we get, I mean, think
Come back, John.
Yep, I think John just froze. Let's wait for John.
I thought it was me.
Wait.
So I had a general question for you guys, thinking of renovating the house with Keller offers. Is this a good market to do it in this shift? Because I'm seeing a lot of properties in the market that they're just sort of not wanting to invest because they don't know if they're going to get it back when they sell it. So I just wondered what your guys' thoughts were, maybe some,
I think
I
it's
work with a lot of investors, and it really depends on what else is out there in the market. If everything is remodeled, then you're gonna have to step up to get what that top dollar rate is. But if everything is, you know, basic, maybe not. I mean, it's really case by case.
And so it depends on the amount, right? And how much or how long are you willing to wait for the sale? If you really, really need, you have to make the numbers and then work with the timeline to see if it's worth it.
Yeah, also, if you do an open house and 20 people show up and 19 say, I would buy this except for, then that's the moment you definitely need to tell the seller, hey, I know you don't want to come out of pocket for this, but this has to get resolved. Everybody's complaining about this. And I could have offers for you today if this was fixed. So, you know, we need to do this.
And in that sense, let's say that by updating that property, then the equation is that that homeowner is going to get more, but it'll take some time to do the upgrade. So you just have to make the numbers and evaluate if it's worth it or not.
Thanks.
So having vendors, but has anyone worked with those providers from teleoffers? Does anyone know how it works?
So I haven't used it. I did go through the program and get certified for it. And I submitted one of my contractors to be a vendor for them, but I haven't had a buyer that wants to actually go through the process of fixing it up. They'd rather either lower the price or wait till someone comes in and then, you know,
All right.
scenario. If it's just one bathroom, then we'll do it.
Yeah. Sorry about the issue there. They had my internet cut out, so I had to switch to a different provider there. All right, so let's hop back into it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at each one of the shift tactics that are out there, right? So as we look at that, there are basically 12. The first one is basically get right or get real, get right mindset and action. And so we're going to kind of go over each one of those things. One of the things I want us to consider, and I'm going to break you guys up into some different groups again. Just this one is going to be a short one, just for about 5 minutes. And what I want you guys to do as we break up into the groups, I'm going to assign each group a tactic, right? So we're going to assign you guys. I'll probably do about 4 groups of 4 or 5, or excuse me. We have about 94 on the call here again, so I'll probably break you up into about 30 more groups too. And I'll have each of you guys, or we'll have 3 different people or 3 different groups doing the same tactic. And what I want you guys to consider is whatever tactic I give you, think about how is that relevant in today's shifting market. So for example, if you get the one on get real, get right mindset and action, how might we as agents have to change the way that we think about the market right now? What do we need to think about or consider when it comes to our buyers and sellers? How might they be thinking in today's market as well? Okay. The second question is how the tactic is relevant regardless of market. So again, using the mindset, okay, how is that relevant in the shifting market? But even if we are not in a shifting market, why might we need to be adaptable in terms of our mindset regardless of what the market looks like? Okay. And then the third question that it asks you is what the tactic looks like in your business. So how are you actually putting that into play, or how are you putting that into practice? Okay. And then we're going to come back and respond. So you're answering 3 questions. How is it relevant in today's market? How is it relevant in any market? And then how are you implementing it in your business right now? So if we look at this, again, we have get real, get right mindset. Second one is remargin your business, expense management, right? Third one is do more with less. How are we leveraging technology, tools, people, right? Next one is finding the motivated. How are we finding people that are actually willing to buy and motivated to buy, or willing to sell and motivated to sell? Getting to the table. How are we converting our leads better? 6, catch people in your web. How are we implementing internet technologies to build more leads? Because in a market shift, we typically need more leads than in a non-shifted market, right? So how are we increasing our lead generation by utilizing or leveraging the web? 7 is pricing ahead of the market. How are we making sure that we're getting more aggressive with pricing so that we aren't chasing the market instead of playing from behind? And I'm going to stop there and I'll explain that one a little bit more because you might not understand that one quite so much. Is you haven't experienced this if you haven't survived the last shift. And what I mean by that is this, right? In the market that we've been in right now, was there really a danger in me overpricing the property? Probably not. Because let's just say, for example, that the house was worth $4 and I priced it $450. The house doesn't sell at $450 in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. I reduce the price to $4. What ends up happening? I probably end up selling for $425 anyway, because in that 2-week time that I didn't get any offers, by now coming down to market values, house prices have maybe gone up. And so there wasn't any risk to the seller and me overpricing. Not a big deal, right? Looking at the last market that we were in, I sold a lot of houses for banks. And if you overpriced in a buyer's market where prices were actually declining, you could actually lose your client a significant amount of money. Because if I said that the house to my seller was worth $4, and they said, hey, John, I want to list at $450. Okay. In the current market, I might have been okay with that, but in this market that we're going into, I let the seller talk me into listing the house at $450, and it doesn't sell. And 3 weeks later, the seller now comes to me and says, okay, John, I'll listen to you. I'll come down to $4, right? What's the danger there? House might not be worth $4 anymore. The house might be worth $375. And so now you're just constantly trying to chase the market and you're chasing it down. And that's what it means by pricing ahead of the market, is as prices, and again, this is maybe not necessarily everywhere. Each one of our markets are unique. But if we're seeing prices declining, we need to make sure that we're pricing ahead of the market, not behind it, because we can lose our client a lot of money if we do. Okay. Strategy 8 is seller staging strategies. How do we get our houses to stand out from the competition? Number 9 is creating urgency. How do we overcome buyers that are unwilling to pull the trigger right now? What's the biggest danger really in a buyer not buying right now?
Interest rates keep going up.
We don't know where interest rates are going to go, because we might get buyers that sit there and say, hey, John, we understand that this is going to turn more into a buyer's market and prices are maybe going to go down a little bit. Awesome. But we don't know what's going to happen with rates. We do know that the Fed said they were likely to raise the rates another 1.5 before the year's over. So even if you were to gain even if you were able to buy that $450,000 house at 400, if rates go to 8, what does that look like to your payment? And did you save anything? We can't guarantee what rates are going to do. What we can guarantee is right now you can get about a 5.5. And if you buy now at 5.5 and rates go to 8, you're protected. If you buy now at 5.5 and rates go down to 4.5 or 4, you can refinance. What can't happen is if you wait and rates go to 8, you can't come back down and get 6, or can't come back down and get 5.5. So how are we creating urgency? Expanding the options. We talked a little bit about creative financing already with like ARMs and point buy downs and things like that. Mastering the market of the moment. How do we stay trained and how do we get educated so that we can be the expert in the market that we're in right now? And then tactic number 12 is bulletproofing the transaction. What are things that we can do to make sure that things don't fall out of escrow? Because, if we lose a transaction, or if our transaction's not bulletproof and it falls apart, it may take us a long time to get another one back in. So how are we really buttoning that up? Okay. So I'm going to break you guys up into groups of about 3 or 4 again. And I'm going to give each one of your groups a tactic to do. So if you are in groups, let's see, we've got 85 in the room right now. So I'm going to tell you guys right now that based on what group you're in, what tactic you're going to have. So we have 85 or 83 divided by 4. We're going to do about 21 groups, right? And so for the 21 groups, I want you guys, groups 1 through 12. If you're in groups 1 through 12, do tactic based on the group that you're associated with, okay? And then if you are in groups 13 through 21, 13 will do tactic 1, 14 will do tactic 2, 15 will do tactic 3, and so forth. So again, groups 1 through 12 will basically be tactics 1 through 12, and then 13 through 24, if there's 24 groups, will basically do the exact same thing. Okay, and 13 being 1, 24 being 12. Everybody clear on that? Cool. So let me get you guys into breakout rooms. And again, how is the tactic relevant in today's shifting market? How is it relevant really in any market? And then how are you implementing it into your business? And it looks like a couple chat questions came through. Okay, cool. And I have somebody that said that they are a new agent. It's still going to be good to be in a breakout and listen as far as that goes. So I'm still going to put everybody in the breakout rooms. All right, so let's get 21 breakout rooms. Actually, let me recreate. We want 21 breakout rooms, or 20, yeah, 21. And here we go. Again, rooms 1 through 12, do tactics 1 through 12. If you are 13 through 21, do basically 1 through about 10 or 11, whatever that works out to. Okay. All right, so we'll break up for about 8 minutes. I'm gonna hop into a couple rooms just to let some of those other ones know which one they're supposed to be doing. First one back. All right. Give a couple minutes here, or not a couple minutes, but looks like everybody's popping back in. I see everything, everybody hitting it back right now. So cool. All right, I think we got everybody back that's coming back. And so let's kind of take a look at the shift tactics here real quick as a whole. And so I'm going to go and share my screen here real fast. And as we're going through these in your workbooks on page 18 is where they start, right? It allows you to take a little bit of notes on some of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about here, right? And so like, for example, on the get real, get right mindset and action, it lists what role does this mindset play in a shift. So as you guys are listening to some of the group's responses, you can write down some of those roles yourself. And then the second question says, what are some of the ways you can be mindful of mindset and stay focused on reaching your goals? So those are some things that you can work on there in your workbooks as well. So let's just kind of take a look at that. If we were in group 1 or if we were in group 13, right? We were supposed to talk a little bit about getting real, getting right, mindset and action. And it says here, you can't control the market, but you can control your outlook and your response to the market. So what are some things that, if we're looking at this again, and again, the activity asks you to think about, how is this tactic relevant in today's shifting market? And how do you implement this tactic? So for somebody from group 1 or group 13, why is it relevant that we get our mindset right now?
Everything starts with mindset. I think I was in group 1.
Well, we'll just go with it. Doesn't matter what group you were in. You responded, so you can keep going.
Everything starts with mindset. You have to start with your mind determined to get the results that you want. You focus on that and you will get that. So it's very important for you to control your thoughts. And that way you can control the actions that you take that will be a part of this, controlling what's happening in your business for this current market.
Yeah, because typically we get a lot of what we throw out there. And what I mean by that is if we sit there and we listen to the news and the media and think that the market is falling, the market's crashing, right? Nobody's going to be able to buy houses. And we listen to that. What's that going to bring to us? Probably a lot of that same stuff. If the energy that we're throwing out there, or if the mindset we have is that this is bad and it's doom and gloom, then that's going to be reflected into our business. So I like that. What else? What are some other things that we should be looking at or considering in terms of mindset as we go into this next market?
I think a lot also has to do for the response to the market, like it mentions here. It's not just the mindset, but also understanding that it's okay for things to look different. It's okay for us to re-strategize and know that the results that we're going to create can be the same. It's just going to look a little different.
Yeah, I really like that, because ultimately the thing is, when the markets change or things are different, the strategies that we utilize today doesn't mean that they won't necessarily work, but they might not work as well, or they might work differently. So like for a good example of that is, we always say that in a shifting market, it's going to take more leads to get more transactions done. And let's just say, for example, that I'm a newer agent and I built my business by buying Zillow. I'm not here to pass judgment and say that there's anything wrong with that. However, what I am saying, that if I was spending, say, for example, $4,000 a month to get the amount of transactions that I wanted to get over the last couple of years, all I'm saying is that same $4,000 I spend right now in this next market going to get me the same results? Probably not. So I need to be open to the fact that I think that's part of the mindset part too. And Minerva, thanks for bringing that up, is we have to be willing to accept things are changing. Not that it's good or not that it's bad. It's just things are going to be different. And am I willing to adapt with that? Right? Cool. Anything else on mindset that you guys came up with that you want to share?
There's a bold law that I really like, and it says what you focus on expands. So if we look at the opportunities, then we will be able to find them. But if we just hold to the always in our current market, we're not going to be able to see the opportunities, and we need to see the opportunities for our clients as well.
Cool. Mitchell, you have something to share as well too. Thanks, Sandra, for that insight.
Yes. Hi, this is Mitch. Sorry, my video is not working. Another bold law: keep your emotions between the lines.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important too, because as we get into a shifted market, can our emotions get out of whack? And are we really servicing our people well if they do, right? Because if we're freaking out because a property is potentially not going to close because we're worried about getting paid, because we're not getting paid as often as we were, or maybe as much as we were, that causes some problems too, right? So we need to really, and we'll talk about that when we get into budgets. But yeah, I think it's important that we keep our emotions within the line as well too. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the second one. And then really quick, just to give you guys a heads up, after we get through these, we'll take a quick little break. Okay. So remargining your business, expense management. The number one determinant of surviving is expense management. What do you think this means? Right? Why is this important in a shifted market? Who was in group 2 or 14?
I was in group 2, and I would say playing red light, green light.
Why is that important?
Because you don't want to overspend, and you want to come ahead with your expenses, because we're moving toward a recession.
Okay, cool.
And
Right.
it's easy to get drawn in by the shiny things and all the people that's calling you saying, sign up for this and sign up for that.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're not mindful of what we're spending our money on in our businesses when we're making money, because everything's just working, right? And we're making enough and we're able to have the quality of life that we want. But then ultimately, when stuff starts to slow down and we're not closing as many deals, or we're not making as much money off of all of the deals, then we typically will inspect what we're spending stuff on a little bit more. And I think that you hit the nail on the head right there, is that we have to play red light, green light. Is this making me money? If so, green light it. Let's go, and we'll keep doing it, or maybe we'll spend more money on it. If it's not making us money, we're going to maybe need to pull this out, or at least scale it back to make sure that we're getting a good return on an investment for that. Okay. Anybody else have anything to share on that one? Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're going to have to go in and inspect everything that we're spending money on in our businesses right now and make sure that it is we're getting a good return for that. Okay, and I think a good example is just going back to online lead gen. A lot of times we'll just spend money out because we're closing the deals we want, we're making the money that we want. And a lot of times we end up overpaying for a lot of that stuff. So make sure that you're getting a good return on investment. And a lot of times, especially in that one, people will look at online lead gen as how many leads am I getting for the dollars that I'm spending? That's not the metric you should be looking at, because we're not looking at how many leads that we're getting based off of how much money we're spending. Because who cares how many leads I get? If I get 1,000 leads and none of them close, is that a good thing? No. So what we really want to think about is, how many transactions am I getting from the leads that I'm paying for? How much is it costing me for an actual closed transaction? So for example, I'm going to use small numbers because the math is easier. But let's just say that I'm spending $1,000 and I'm getting 100 leads. Okay, that's $10 a lead. Great. I might scream through the roof that $10 a lead is actually pretty good, but it's not really. But let's just say that is right. And out of that $1,000 that I'm spending at $10 a lead, let's just say that I get one transaction. So now my cost per client acquisition is actually $1,000 because I'm getting one closed deal for every 1,000 that I'm spending. And for me, I'll do that trade potentially all day long, because now if it costs me $1,000 to make a $10,000 transaction, that's like printing money. Now all of a sudden we always need to continue to inspect that though, because let's just say I'm spending $5,000 a month on Zillow now, not 1,000, and let's say that I'm closing one transaction. Now it's I might get 400 leads and or 500 leads and be thinking to myself, hey, great, I'm still getting my leads at $10 a lead. However, the cost of client acquisition is now changed to $5,000 to get one deal instead of $1,000 to get one deal. And if values, let's say, dip, and now we're basically saying, hey, my commission is $8,000 instead of $10,000, and now my transaction, I'm spending $5,000 to get one deal to make $8,000. Now I'm making $3,000 off of that. Or before, I was spending $1,000 to make a $10,000 transaction, and I was making $9,000 off of that. So we need to always make sure that we're taking a look at what's the cost of client acquisition, especially if we're buying leads. Okay, cool. All right. Any questions on number 2? Everybody clear on what that shift tactic is? Okay, doing more with less, leverage. Says build core competencies around what really matters and associate with people who are on the same page as you. So somebody from group 3 or group 15, or excuse, yeah, 15.
So
You guys come up with.
I was in group 15. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So Marcus Schnellenberger here from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was in group 15. So leverage, do more with less. One way to do that is by circle prospecting, either with a buyer that you have, if there's nothing available, because we are still in a low inventory market. They're looking for a certain neighborhood. You could always send a golden letter to a neighborhood. And on the flip side, if you have a listing that you're listing, under contract and selling, you could hand out flyers in the neighborhood, door hangers, flyers, hang them on the doorknob, just listed, open house, pending, just sold, and then circle prospect and follow up at that as well. That's a cheap way to leverage, your current business, either listings, sellers, or buyers, and try to get more business out of that without having a high expenditure on marketing, Zillow leads and all that.
Cool. Thanks, Marcus. And that really has to do a little bit more with kind of the next topic, which is lead generation. When we typically think about leverage, at least in Kellerisms, a lot of it's the people conversation, which is why you can see on the slide here, it shows people. So if we go back and we look at this, and again, look at the quote, it says, build core competencies around what really matters and associate with people who are on the same page as you. So Edward, you raised your hand, so you have something to add to that?
Yeah, so I was in group 3 and we talked about leaning into the community more. So like go talk to code enforcement officers that maybe see vacant homes or see homes that are in disrepair, see if you can get the address so then you can go contact the seller. That doesn't really cost you anything. So you're doing more with less. Reach out to the schools, reach out to your lenders, if you have like a credit repair partner, reach out to them and ask them, hey, who do we think is on the cusp of becoming a buyer? Can you, would you refer those people to me? And just kind of put together a team around you that, you bounce off of them, whether it's social media, where you do like a YouTube video where you're saying, hey, I'm going to invite my credit person to do a video on how people can kind of better their credit faster. Or you talk to your lender and say, hey, can we do a quick 1-minute video on Instagram about rates or things like that? Just connecting with people more often who want your business to grow and want you to succeed just like you want them to succeed.
Yeah, so I think that's really, really good in terms of leveraging those around us that are going to help us with our business. And maybe, okay, hey, I'm not going to spend $5,000. Maybe I can't afford to spend $5,000 on Zillow anymore. So how can I get more out of my lender? How could I get more out of my title rep? The vendors that I know that are doing landscaping or pools or whatever, how could I potentially leverage them to help me get more business, right? How can I streamline the things that I'm doing, not just with people, but technology? Because ultimately, a lot of us, I can't tell you how many agents I talk to that don't really work their database, right? Maybe they're not really using a CRM. So how am I leveraging drip campaigns or smart plans in Command to be able to go out there and leverage that to do some of the heavy lifting for me, so that I'm not necessarily having to do it myself, right? Cool. Anybody have anything else to add to that one with the leverage? Again, leverage is making sure that we are, it's more of a people conversation. How am I working with others that are in alignment with what I want to accomplish, that I can get them to help support me, right? It says, yeah, a question came up in the chat. How do you get leverage from them? Landscapers, title, etc. Well, Claudia, I think it's really a thing of, if I'm a listing agent and I am giving, XYZ title all of my business, what am I getting from them? Maybe I'm not sitting there necessarily saying leads, but how are they supporting me? And if I have a vendor that I'm giving business to, and then I'm not getting reciprocated in any way, I need to have a conversation with them And if there's not a way that they can help support me with my business, then maybe I got to find a different title rep that's going to be a little bit more aggressive in doing that for me, right? Same thing with my mortgage people. Hey, if I give Joe Smith, 12 mortgage deals last year and he gave me nothing, hey, Joe, what's going on, man? I gave you 12 last year. I know people are coming to you about getting financed for mortgages and talking about that. Who are you giving your referrals to? And if it's not me, what do I have to do to earn your business? I gave you 12. And if they're not willing to do that, maybe I need to have a different conversation with that person. Same thing, what was brought up there, it said, landscapers, even landscapers. Hey, I have given this Joe landscaper 20 new clients this past year. And what am I getting from him? Because think about it like that, is if I'm getting ready to sell my house, I'm probably going to have a conversation with my landscaper and my pool guy and or my maid if I have all those people before I get ready to list, because I want to get my house in really, really good shape. So a lot of those people who do those service type jobs, you might not think about them as being a potential source for business, but they find out about a lot of that stuff before we even do, right? So as I'm putting people out there, or as I'm giving business to other people, what am I getting in return, right?
What's a good way to have that discussion if you're newer and maybe don't have a lot of business under your belt?
I would basically just say, if you're new and you don't have a lot of transactions under your belt, find some of those title reps and ask them what you need to do to earn their business, right? Or whatever rep you're talking about, whether it's title, mortgage. What do I need to, I know I'm newer. I know that we haven't done that many transactions together yet. Really want to make sure that I have a good reciprocal relationship with the people that I'm working with. What do I need to do to earn your business? I think that's a really easy way to ask that question. All right, so let's move on to the next one so we can get to our break. I know we're a little bit over. Finding the motivator. We've already talked about this a little bit, but it says nothing becomes more critical to success than finding motivated buyers and sellers and closing them to an appointment. So we won't spend too long on this because we already kind of covered that a little bit, but the group 4 or group 16, was there anything that you guys came up with that you would particularly like to share? All right, well, we'll kind of skip over that one because, like I said, that one is one like that we talked a little bit about already, making sure we find people that are going to be able to be willing and able to buy during the shift. One question, though, that's on page 20 is we look at that and it says, why are fewer consumers motivated to buy and sell? So in a shift, why are people more reluctant to, or more motivated to buy? And I think we talked about one, interest rates are rising, right? At least right now, houses haven't declined too much. Why might sellers be reluctant to sell right now, though? What about that one? Just so we understand mindset a little bit more.
What was the question?
Why might sellers be not unmotivated to sell right now?
They don't know where to go.
Yeah, hey, I got to buy in this market too. So I don't want to sell my house because now I got to go out and buy in this market, and homes are still expensive and rates are up, right? What else?
They think they're not going to get any offers.
Maybe they think they're not going to get any offers right now. Maybe the time has passed, right? So those are, again, finding the motivated. Who's the sellers that have to sell? The downsizers, again, are good ones because, hey, I don't care what rates are because when I sell my house that I own free and clear out, I'm going to downsize and I'm going to pay cash, right? So making sure that we're thinking about who's going to be motivated and who's going to be able to be ready, willing, able to buy or sell right now, and do my lead generations match up to hitting those people? And if they don't, I probably need to modify or adjust that a little. Hey, really quick, getting through the other ones, getting to the table, lead conversion, right? So how are we converting people a little bit better? So if we go into it, and we talked a little bit about this already, what effect does a shift have on lead conversion? Are you going to convert as many leads?
No, less
No.
leads.
So we're not going to convert as many leads. So what effect does that have on us? We're going to need to do what?
More lead generation.
We're going to need to get more leads. And we're going to need to work on our conversion skills a little bit more, right? What role does your value proposition play in lead conversion? And again, the questions that I'm reading this off of are page 22. So what do you think your role plays on, what role does your value prop play on lead conversion? We talked about your value. Why is your value important, really important right now? Can you just throw a house up on the MLS and sell it? In the market that we came out of, for sure. Is that going to be enough in tomorrow's market?
People need to trust that we're going to do a great job for them right now more than ever.
Yeah, is ultimately, rather than me just saying, hey, I'm an agent, I'm going to need to explain to my people how I'm going to be able to get them a really good deal on selling their house, how I'm going to be able to navigate them with high interest rates to be able to get into a house that's going to be affordable to them, right? So we need to make sure that we have that a lot of our conversion ability is going to be our ability to really understand what the market is, and what the market's doing. And then one of the questions that kind of gets thrown in there too says, what role can technology, and it says KW technology, but I'm just going to say technology in general. How can technology play a role in boosting our conversion rates? This is really, really important. How can technology play a role in boosting our conversion rates? What do you guys think?
You can reach more people for less money.
I could reach more people for less money, and I'll give you an example, right? So thank you very much. That's a great response. When you think about it, when I talk to agents that are either newer or even really experienced agents that have been around for a long time selling a lot of houses, one of the top things that they have problems with is converting leads. And what I mean by that, you might say, why does a top agent have a problem with converting leads? The difference between a top agent and some of our newer agents, a lot of times, is just I have the ability to spend more money to get more leads. And because I have so many leads as a top agent, I'm just going to naturally close a lot of them. But there's going to be a lot of them that get wasted too. And it makes sense in the sense that you think about it like this. If I get 100 leads in and 2 of them are hot, who am I going to pay attention to? The 2 leads. If 98 of them aren't very hot, I'm going to probably forget about them. I might follow up with them after my 2 hot leads or I close those, right? But what ends up happening, and let me ask you really quick, is for those of you that are experienced agents on here, is how many times in your career have you got a lead, they weren't really hot, they weren't responding to you right away or whatever, and you kind of put them on the back burner and you worked the hot leads that you got. And then when things got slower again, you went back through that list of the people that you had, had leads from before, and then you called all those people again to try to drum up some more business. How many of you have made that dreaded phone call and had the person say, hey, John, nice to hear from you. Man, I wish you would have called me, a little bit earlier. I just closed on a house 2 weeks ago. That ever happened to any of you guys?
What in the world?
Yeah, that's my reaction too, right? That happens, and part of the reason that happens is we focus on what's ready to buy or sell now when we should, but then we don't have a system in place to work the leads that aren't a priority for us right now. And technology allows us to continue to nurture those leads without us necessarily having to work them. So it's important that we get technology going as well too. All right, so let's just kind of motor through the next ones. Group 6, or in this case, I believe we're at group 16 or 17. A website, catch people in your web, internet lead conversion. So if we look at this one, again, the questions on page 22, how do you know your internet lead generation is effective? That's a pretty easy one. How do we know that our internet lead generation efforts are effective? What do you guys think?
You're getting responses?
Yeah, you're getting leads. You're getting people that are being responsive. And so if you're not getting people that are responsive, then we need to make sure that we're paying a little attention to the internet lead generation, right? And we know the tools that are available, because ultimately our websites, our consumer app that we have from KW, that's going to allow us to stand out from the competition, because they have the resources and the tools and the market neighborhood information that's going to allow us to be able to get more engagement from our people. So going into the next one, price ahead of the market. We talked a little bit about that one already. What about group 7? What are some of the things you guys came up with in making sure that pricing ahead of the market's important?
Well, John, one of us pointed out to the auction effect, of course, pricing below the market. So if the market is trending downward, then price ahead of that, so that you can generate more offers and in effect get what you really wanted to get in the first place.
Yeah.
And then I shared where my previous broker had always taught to price in the bottom 20% of your comparables with active and pending sales, to be able to see where are you competitive enough that you're going to be able to get the response that you need.
Absolutely. And then Patrick, really quick, what do you think a newer, and because I know you're really experienced, what skills and knowledge do you think you need to have to price homes appropriately? What should a newer agent be considering or doing?
Yeah, I think a couple of them is understanding the CMA and how to interpret the information that's there. Understanding the market trend in the community that you're working in. And a lot of that, I remember when I first started real estate, I'd go to open houses because I didn't have any business. So I'd go to open houses and look at other houses. So I kind of like know what does that house look like in comparison and pricing. And that helped out a lot as well. So if you're new to the business and you don't have any buyers and seeing homes, go out and see what the inventory looks like. And that'll help you when you are interpreting the market.
Cool. Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, so looking at strategy 8, stand out from the competition, seller staging strategies. Why is staging potentially important as we get into a more of a buyer's market? Anybody from group 8 or group 20?
Buyers don't have an imagination.
What was that?
Buyers have no imagination.
Well, one, buyers maybe don't have any imagination, and being able to see how it could look is going to help them motivate them to buy. What are some other things? If you look at the shift tactic, this shift tactic in its entirety, right? Because we're just kind of glancing through some of these things, right? Is that when we look at a hot seller's market, you could be an ugly house and you can be overpriced. And what's going to happen? You're going to still sell. If you are an ugly house and you're overpriced in a buyer's market, what's going to happen? The house is going to sit. So we need to make sure that our pricing is reflective of what the condition of the house is. And the better we can make the condition of the house appear or look, the better price that we're going to be able to get off of that as well too. That's really important, right? And Patrick mentioned in there, staging could be just decluttering, fresh paint, and cleaning. It doesn't need to necessarily be this massive, like, you know, home renovation and things like that. Okay. So people prefer not to have to do repairs, but will be willing if the price is in their price range and if it fits the urgency of their need. That's the other thing too, is that if we don't want to make repairs, we might need to adjust the price as well too, right? Donna said staged homes sell faster according to NAR, but definitely in a buyer's market, because ultimately the thing is that if I have nothing to choose from, am I willing to maybe buy an ugly house? Yeah. If I have a lot to choose from and I have an ugly house that's priced more than a really nice looking house, I'm not going to buy your house. So we need to make our homes as attractive as possible, or we need to adjust the price accordingly. Okay. All right. Again, motoring through, creating urgency, overcoming buyer reluctance. You can't create urgency if there isn't a good reason for it, and you certainly can't fake it. So what are some things in terms of creating urgency that we could do with our buyers? We talked a little bit about one, right? Is, hey, understanding different loan options. Let me ask you these questions real fast. Is, you know, if you're looking at the terms, and this is again on page 26, right, where this is at. One, when's your best opportunity to assess buyer motivations? How do you find out what the motivations of a buyer are? How many of us are having actual buyer appointments to where we're doing kind of like a buyer consult to find out what their motivations are? A lot of us just randomly running into our cars, running out to a house and showing buyers properties. I think getting in and having those buyer consults now more than ever can be really important. I need to find out what your motivation is. I need to find out what you want to accomplish. I need to find out, are you ready, willing, and able to buy? And if not, what do we need to do in order to make you ready, willing, and able to buy? Okay. One of the questions that I think is kind of important here is, it says on page 26 again, it says, when can buyer reluctance creep into the transaction process? So when do you think it is that our buyers could suddenly start to get reluctant that maybe weren't? And what can we do to combat that?
When you ask them to get pre-approved, sometimes they get very reluctant.
Yeah, now I see that rate and see what the payments are going to actually do. I don't know, man. Don says during the inspection process, think about how we can combat those things, right? During the inspection process, maybe we weren't going to those home inspections. Now we probably should. We need to make sure that we're aligning with a home inspector that can explain things really well and not create a doomsday scenario. I was just in a team meeting at a market center not too long ago, and they were saying how, this agent used an inspector that they hadn't used before because they needed to. And it was a nightmare because the person was making it sound like the world was falling in on this house. And a lot of the things just really weren't that bad. This person just didn't explain them very well, right? All right, looking at expanding the options, we talked about creative financing a little bit already. So we'll kind of gloss over this one, right? Making sure that we know different financing options so things can stay affordable, really, really important. Mastering the market of the moment. This one just really goes down into education, right? Am I educating myself so that I know what's going on, so that I can talk about that and I can best educate my clients? How do we do this? How are you guys, really quick, just in the chat, how are you guys educating yourself right now? One of them is coming to a class like this. What else? Be here, right? New certifications. Read the Shift book.
Knowing your market and the numbers.
Know your market and the numbers, because all markets are different. Podcasts, reading. And I like the reading part, right? And I like the podcast part too. Just make sure that what you're reading and the podcasts that you are looking at are from people that really understand what's going on too. How many of you guys have been on Facebook lately and seen somebody on there telling you how to navigate a shift that was 7 years old during the last shift, right? So not that you can't have a 21-year-old that's really, really good and knowledgeable, but in terms of if I'm looking at really navigating a shift, I want to make sure that I'm reaching out to where I'm connecting or I'm learning from people who have been there and have been able to navigate through that. Okay. And then the last one is bulletproof the transaction. What are some strategies that we can do to make sure that transactions close? What are some of your guys' best practices and tips?
Take backup offers.
What was that?
Taking backup offers.
Taking backup offers. What else? One of the things I think is really important is sometimes maybe just having a conversation with your buyers or your sellers especially on seller transactions, hey, I don't know this mortgage company. This is the highest offer. I don't know this mortgage company. I've never heard of them before. I don't know this agent, or maybe I do know this agent and this agent doesn't have a very good reputation in terms of getting deals closed. However, I got this other offer over here from buyer B, $5,000 less, but this mortgage company is top notch. The guy's already been pre-approved, not just pre-qualified. I know this agent is on top of things. So if you're concerned about things closing on time, I've never seen this agent miss a deadline before. Is highest offer always the best offer? And again, it depends on the motivation of our sellers. If closing is more important, sometimes maybe we don't take the highest offer, but we take the one that we know that we're going to close. So a great way to bulletproof your transaction is doing it right at the beginning and making sure that the person's pre-approved and by a reputable lender and working with a really great agent that he knows not going to miss deadlines. Any other tips on closing transaction? Keeping the terms of the contract, Marcus, that's a really good one. Do what it takes within my power to get to the closing table. What do you mean by that, Marcus? Within your power?
Yeah, so sometimes if there's like a little inspection problem and it's only a couple $100 issue and the buyer and seller can't meet in the middle, I've given up, my commission, $200 or whatever. I've worked with the listing agent or buyer's agent, whatever it might be, and split it down the middle, just to keep the deal from going.
Yeah, that's a good one. Now, here's another thing too, is I just always, when I was in production, I always just was in the mindset that, especially if it was an agent that I didn't know on the other end of the transaction. So maybe I don't know Joe Smith as an agent. So I'm not going to say he's good or bad or either way, but I don't know Joe. So I'm going to just anticipate that Joe's not going to do his job. And if I have to do everything in order to make this deal close, I'm going to do Joe's job for him too. So if I'm just expecting Joe to do what he's supposed to do, I'm setting myself up for potential failure. I'm going to make sure that I call Joe and remind Joe of deadlines. I'm going to make sure that, hey, Joe, the inspection contingency is up in 2 days. I just want to make sure that you know where we're at. I'm not going to just wait until the last day and then he tells me no, right? So be prepared to do some of the work of the other agent, of the other side. You shouldn't have to, but if you want to bulletproof your transaction, you're going to always be prepared and make sure that that those things are buttoned up or those things are dialed up. Okay. All right. So we'll work on this for homework as far as that goes. We don't need to do this right now. I want to take a quick 10-minute break because we are a little bit over in terms of that time. And then we'll get back into it and we'll wrap things up for the day. So it is 1:08 right now, Pacific time. So we are at 4:08 Eastern time. We're going to come back at 18 after. All right, so we are at the end of the break here. We're on a downward stretch, at least for today. We probably won't get through all of chapter 2 because the content for the first and second session is a little bit longer than tomorrow's. So we'll probably finish up somewhere around the middle to 3/4 worth of content for chapter 2, and then we'll finish that up tomorrow along with chapters 3 and 4. So a couple things I want you to do for homework, and just to speed up a little bit, we'll kind of go through some of the activities as homework rather than actually do during the class here, which this is one of them. I want you guys for homework today, and then we'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow when you guys come back. This is page 30 of your guys' book, and it says just on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your effectiveness for each tactic. Get real, get right. If you had to give yourself a score, what is your score on the scale of 1 to 10? So you'll do that for all of the tactics. And basically what we'll do is tomorrow we'll come back and we'll talk about what are some of the ones that maybe we're a little bit lower in And what are some things that we could do to get better at those things? Okay. So again, this is page 30. Asks you just to rate your abilities on each one of those things. And then it just asks you a question: which one are you already doing well? And what growth have you seen in your business from doing those? And then where do you have the most opportunity? The other reason that we want to do some of those things as well too is we don't have to necessarily be a master at everything. So what are the 3 or 4 things that we do really well that we could double down on and get the most return from? Anybody not clear on what I want you guys to do for page 30? Cool. So breaking through to higher achievement. So if we're looking at this is on page 32, right? And what it's asking for here is, if you're newer to Keller Williams, you know, a lot of times in our business we start out purposeful, right? We start out entrepreneurial. We go out there and with our natural behavior and with our drive and with our enthusiasm, we can achieve great levels of success. But what ends up happening? You know, there's only so much we can physically do, right? So in other words, I might be the best door knocker on the planet. There's only so many doors I can knock on during a day. And at some point, my business is going to plateau because I can't physically knock on any more doors, right? People will call the cops on me if I'm knocking on their door at midnight trying to sell them a house. So we need to do something different, whether it's training, coaching, or consulting, that is going to allow us to do more by whether it's, you know, maybe getting focus a little bit more, whether it's going to be strategically, you know, doing things differently, whether it's adopting a model or putting a system in. We're going to have to change something in order for us to get a higher level of success. And so that's one of the questions that it asks here is, especially in a shift, why do you think it's really important to be learning based? What are you guys?
You're always going to stay on top of your market.
Yeah, you want to be able to stay on top of the market because things are different, right? We talked about that a little bit more. Is we're going to have to change. Things are changing. What worked before might not. It's not that it might not work today. It just might work differently. How are we changing?
You'll see the trends. You'll see the trends. You'll see the trends before the media reports the trends, which then every other agent is reporting the trends after the fact.
Okay, what else? In this last
like
market, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's just like you said, everything's always changing. Like in every profession that you want to go into, you always have to keep learning. Like doctors never stop taking training classes, you know, because there's always new technology, new ways of doing things.
Yep, definitely for sure. And here's the thing too is, you know, let's just say in this past market, right? How many? Let's say a year ago, if you held an open house for a house, how many potential buyers came through your opens?
All of them.
Well, just give me a number. Like if you held an open house on a Saturday or a Sunday, how many potential buyers would you see?
I had an open house for a under $600,000 house in Miami. We had 23 people show up to the open house.
Okay,
only
so
by appointment. Those were verified people. Like I had, you know, pre-approvals from. I had like 40 requests, but only 23 were approved to actually see the house.
Well, that's what I'm saying is if you did it like that, which was really purposeful, but if you just held a random open house and anybody could come through, I was hearing stories of people saying that 40, 50 people came through their open houses, right? So what I'm getting at is in the market that we were in, if I could hold an open house that 40 people come through, what are the chances I'm going to find a good lead out of one of those 40 people? Pretty good, right? Now what happens if I hold an open house and 3 people come to it, 2 of them basically are nosy neighbors and 1 of them can't get pre-approved for a loan? Not that the open houses don't work. I'm going to just have to strategically think a little bit differently on how I might go about doing those to get better leads, right? Mitchell or Mitch.
Yeah. Okay, open houses have changed, at least in this market. Open houses are now being used more as a showing tool versus a lead generation tool, which I don't like that. But that's what's happening. So people going to the open houses are mostly with realtors, and it's as a showing.
Right. And so I think that's the difference between entrepreneurial is in the last market, I could get away with being a little bit more entrepreneurial because, hey, I'm going to just wake up today and go hold an open house and I'm going to do business. That might not work exactly the way that I want it worked yesterday. Not that open houses don't work, but maybe now I need to get a model for holding open houses. So instead of just putting a sign out there, maybe I'm going to have to invite neighbors. Maybe I'm going to have to walk the neighborhood or canvass the neighborhood to invite neighbors to the open house. Maybe I'm going to have to put more signs out. Maybe I'm going to have to actually navigate walking people through the house to really sell the house to them rather than just letting them walk through on their own. Maybe I'm going to have to get a little bit more strategic on how I get people to leave or give me their information so I have a lead to work, right? Because what's the number one thing people want when they come through an open house? Just to give you an example, what's the number one thing people want?
To know the price.
They want info, right? What's the price? I want the flyer. That's the, what do people automatically reach for when they come in the open house? They reach for that flyer. What does it look like if you don't create a flyer for it? I learned this from Chris Suarez, who is part of Place, who had been Kenny teamed up a couple of years back. And when I was still in production, this really, really worked a lot. Chris had said, we don't hand out flyers at open houses anymore. And the reason is because that's what people want. And if I give them what they want without giving me anything in return, what incentive do they have to give me their information? So one of the ways or one of the things that they did in changing or shifting the way that they did opens was they stopped handing out flyers. And when people would come into the open house, they would say, hey, do you have a flyer? And I would say, hey, listen, I do have a flyer, but I try to save trees. I don't print them out anymore. It's a digital flyer. What's a good contact for you? And then I'll text that to you right away, or I'll email that to you right away. So now they have to give me something in order to get what they want, rather than me just giving it to them. Because again, what incentive do people have to not leave the name Joe Smith on your sign-in sheet if you give them what they want when they walk in? So it's just about, again, think what are some strategies like that? What are different models that we can use to hold a seventh level open house? What are systems that we can do to become more purposeful about the actions or activities that we do to allow us to break through where our natural ability is not going to get us anymore, right? Awesome. Any questions on that? Okay, so before we move on to the next section here real fast, what are some ahas that you guys have? What were some things that you learned in the first section that maybe you hadn't thought about or didn't know about?
For me, one of the things is it's okay to change your strategy. I have been a new agent for about 7 months, and I was learning strategies, but with this shifting market, I'm learning now. My aha is I've learned a lot of strategies. Some of them I weren't able to implement earlier on because they just didn't make sense at that time. But it's okay. It's not like, oh, you better not do that. You better do it. Stick to this. So that was my big aha, that it's okay to change strategies for the current market.
Yeah, we have to adapt, right? 2 more and then we'll move on. What are some other ahas that we got?
Hey, for me, I like the last one about give something to get something. Because I do notice, like, when people walk in, they never want to leave their information, but after you have a conversation with them and you see something in their eyes, go, oh, then it feels that they're more willing to give you the information. So I thought that was really good in some of the strategies there. I love the price ahead of the market. That was also a really good one. And thinking about how to think about your expenses and the cost for acquisition.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Melissa. One more before we move on.
Yeah, it's important to be learning based during a shifting market.
Yeah, especially during a shifting market, because again, in a hot sellers market, the entrepreneurial style can be really, really successful. But if we're not learning based, when we get into a more difficult market where negotiation and pricing strategy becomes really important, we're going to have to kind of get back to the books and learn some of those fundamentals that maybe we didn't learn. Right? Awesome. All right. So some objectives for the remainder of the class. These are, we talked a little bit about mindset in chapter 1. Some things that we're going to look at now is identifying growth opportunities because you can grow in any market. We're going to learn on how to analyze current performance and adjust your appointment goals as needed based on your conversion rates. So we're going to learn a little bit more about conversion rates. We're going to analyze and adjust time blocking so that you get better at managing your time and making sure that you save time to do the lead generation things that you need to be doing. We're going to learn about how to tailor your message and your method a little bit more to make sure that you're meeting the needs of your buyers and sellers. We're going to talk about scripting and how scripts can help us increase conversion ratios. We're going to create an action plan because who cares what you learn if you don't put it into action? And then we're going to learn a little bit more on leveraging some of the technology that you have available to save you time and money and provide some value to your clients. Okay. All right. So we talked a little bit about get real, get right already. We're going to jump into shift your lead generation and conversion. We'll finish that up tomorrow along with the activities and putting all this stuff into action. So if we look at finding the motivator, right? And if you're looking at this right now, this is on page 34 of your books, right? So we're looking at a case study here. So it says, getting your mindset right so you can take the right actions for your life and your business, specifically lead generation. That's the challenge. The solution is, do not imagine that everything you have been doing will keep working. We talked a little bit about that. We talked about doubling down on lead generation. We talked about not confusing action with making progress or achievement. You've got to take action. The important thing isn't doing things, it's doing the right things, right? Because we can keep ourselves busy all day long. It doesn't mean that we're going to be successful at that. So James Shaw, if you don't know, he leads the Pivot Shift Ahead call on Facebook. They do that every morning. If you don't know anything about that, I'll get you some information on the date, the time, and how to access that. Really, really good resources. Doesn't cost anything. And you get to network with lots of agents out there on shift tactics and topics. Okay. So let's kind of take a look at shifting your lead generation and conversion. Now, here's a quote by James too, that I think is really, really important. And it says, you must get to the point that you care more about the people inside of your house than you do about the people outside of your house. What do you think that means?
You run your business.
Be more
to take
concerned
care
with
of the
your
people in
family.
house.
Okay, we got two people talk at once. Edward, why don't you go, and then whoever was talking after that hit up the next one.
Yeah, just you got to care more about taking care of your family and putting them up front and first.
Okay. And then I got Emily says your big why in the chat box. Anything else? I think that's really important, is understanding the big why, and which could be family. It says here, you must get to the point that you care more about the people inside of your house than you care about the people outside of your house. So if I focus in on what's important to me, what my big why is, then that's going to help me mentally prepare and get my mindset in the right place that it needs to be to do the things that I have to do, right? Where if I let outside things get in the way of what's really important to me, if I'm not focusing in on the things that are my big why, when things get hard, it's going to really be hard for me to do the things that I have to do. Mitch.
Is that something like what Gary Keller always just does? When he plans his year, the first thing he does is he plans his vacation. Is that kind of like what we're talking about here?
Yeah, well, it could be planned vacations. It could be buying an investment property, whatever is important to you, making sure we know what those are. And then that's going to help us when it comes time to actually do the hard work, right?
Okay.
Awesome. So looking into our database here, this is something that's important if we look at, we need to know how many, and we're going to get into this, but we need to know how many contacts. And this, if you're following, oops, I didn't mean to go there. If you're following at home in your handouts, we're on like page 38, right? And it says, first question on page 38 says, how many existing contacts in your database haven't been contacted in the last 3 months? So I'm going to hop out of here real quick. And I'm going to go into command. I'm going to show you some things in command that we can do to help us. So let me go to command. And can you guys all see my command screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So it said, and again, I'm not in production, so mine's going to look really, really bad. So hopefully your guys' won't look very, very bad. But if I go into contacts, right? A couple things that we can do is when we look at this, we can see right here last contacted. So if I go to say Aaron Schwartz, I can see that Aaron wasn't contacted or was contacted 2 months ago. And how often should we theoretically be reaching out to our people?
Quarterly.
We should be reaching out to them quarterly. So in Aaron's case, am I in decent shape with Aaron? Yeah, I'm in decent shape with Aaron. Now, I don't even know who this number is. So that's obviously a problem right there anyway, because I don't even have a name for that. So that's just leads. But let's go back to this one. Now, I have an excuse here because this is not a potential client. This is just somebody that I know, but however, that could be a client. This says that I have not reached out to Aaron, for 2 years. So that's why we need to be making sure that we are looking at our command, or if we have a different database or a different CRM that we're using, we should always be able to see when's the last time that we've contacted this person. And I know that Emmy says you should be contacting 1 time a month for your SOI. Well, technically, we should be reaching out to our people who are doing some sort of connect 36 times, right? Because that's why we call it a 36 touch. However, in terms of physical voice-to-voice contact, we basically say that you should do at least a quarterly call. Now, there's not a problem if you do it more often than that, but a text message, email, that should be happening multiple times a month, every single month. But from a call standpoint, where I actually have a actual interaction or two-way conversation with them, that technically should be quarterly, right? So this is going to give us some really good insight on who we should be calling, which is important, right? So if we haven't contacted somebody within the last 3 months, then we should be going through here, and that's our call list, right? What's the risk if you don't stay in contact with your existing database? What do you think?
Someone else contacting them.
Somebody else is going to contact them. Here's one thing we know too, right? Is that, and this has zero to do with real estate. This is just the way that people work, right? Is that they've done consumer studies for years. The average person can remember the names of how many brands do you think? And not just real estate. If I was to sit there and say, how many brands of toothpaste can you name? How many sodas can you name? How many cereal brands can you name? How many soap brands can you name? What's the average? The average consumer can remember the names of how many brands? Okay, I see one says 3 on screen here, right? the average, according to, and I forget where the statistic came from, but they said the average consumer can actually remember the names of like 2 brands, right? So if we aren't contacting our people regularly, staying in emotional proximity with them, they're going to forget about who we are. And we're going to run the risk of them not remembering us when it comes to the time to buy, sell, or refer real estate, right? It's as simple as that. Now, on the flip side of that, also, NAR, according to NAR, what's the percentage of people that only interview one agent to list their house?
70% or something.
70%, right? So if I could be one of the top 2 names that's remembered, and I can get that first appointment, what are the chances that I'm going to actually get the person's business? Really, really high, right? And so that's what the risk in not staying in contact with our database is, that we're going, if we don't stay in contact with our people, somebody else will, or even if somebody else doesn't, they'll forget about who we are, and then we run the risk of not getting an opportunity at them, right? And Jason really, Abrams, our CEO of industry, basically says, we have to stay in emotional proximity with our people. So when it comes time for them to buy, sell, or refer real estate or invest in real estate, they don't think about anybody else but us. Okay? And then the third question on page 38 says, what message are you sending to people in your database when you don't systematically reach out and add value and nurture the relationship? What are you telling me by not basically talking to me?
We don't care.
Yeah, we don't care. You're not important. You're a transaction, right? And how many people are going to be excited to do business with you if they feel that you're just a transaction, if they're just a transaction? Okay, so again, going back here, make sure that you log into your database and look at when you last visited your people, right? Has it been more than 3 months for a majority of those people? And if so, time to get on the phone, right? All right, let me get into the slide deck again. All right, this is one of my favorite ones. So I'm going to change my screen here, at least on my picture, and I'm going to put my webcam on again. So we're going to go to my overhead cam so we can pay attention to me as we're going through this, plus the slides. So if we look at this, right, and I'm going to help you guys learn how to convert your own numbers here. So I'm going to just give you an example. Let's just say that I make 20 contacts a day. So, and again, number of contacts are the people I physically talk to, not dials, because it doesn't say dials, it says contacts. So let's just say A, for example, A here, we're going to say that that's 20. Or actually a day, so that equals out to 100 a week, right? And then B is the number of contacts defined as a lead. So what that means is, out of those 100 contacts that I make, how many of them actually turn into leads? So let's just say, for example, if I make 100, let's just say, for example, if I call 50 people a day, which gets me 20 contacts a day, which gets me 100 contacts in a week, that out of those 100 people I actually talk to, let's just say that I can get 4 leads out of that. And what I am defining as a lead is anybody that is able to potentially buy, sell, invest, or refer me real estate, right? Now we look at C, is the leads that became listing appointments. So out of those 4 leads that I got, how many of them did I get to be an appointment? So let's say that my conversion ratio is pretty good and I can get about 3 of those actually turn into appointments. And then let's say appointments that signed into listing contracts. So that's D. So out of the 100 people I call, I get 4 leads, I get 3 appointments. And out of those 3 appointments, I now get, say, 2 listing agreements. right? So now to configure our conversion rates, if you haven't done this exercise or you don't know, we're going to take a look here now, and let me pull up my calculator here. We look, if we want to get the conversion rate on contacts to leads, right? What we do here is we take B, which B is 4, and we divide that by A, which A in our case here was this 100 number. So if we divide 4 by 100, that gives us basically 4%. So we know that our conversion rate of contacts to leads is 4%. Now we want to look at the number of leads that became appointments. So out of those appointments, how many leads did we, out of those leads, how many appointments did we get? So now we basically take that same number and we say, okay, C is 3 appointments divided by 4 leads, right? That's 75%. So my conversion rate now on leads to appointments is 75%. And now we want to look at how many actually signed contracts. And so now we can take a look at that and say, okay, hey, listen, D, what's the D number? D was 2. I got 2 listing agreements, and I'm dividing that by the number of appointments that I go on, which is 3, and it's basically 67%. So now that we know our conversion rates, it's going to allow us to do the activities that we need to do a little bit better. I know that I'm going to convert about 4% of all my contacts. That'll turn into actual leads. So if I want more than 4%, like let's just say, for example, hey, I need to get these leads up, right? And I know that my conversion ratio is 4%. If I need 8 leads a week, I need to make 200 contacts. And then I know that I convert 75% of the leads that I get into appointments. And I know that I can convert about 67% of those appointments into an actual listing agreement. And then we could even take this a step further. We could say, how many of those listing agreements actually close, right? So let's just say that that number was 1 out of this whole scenario. Now I would know that my conversion rate on actually closing to listing agreement would be 50% roughly, which is better than that. But then now I can just work backwards and say, hey, if I want 1 closing, how many listing agreements do I need to get? How many appointments do I need to go on? How many leads do I need to get? And in order to get that many leads, how many actual contacts do I need to make? And then this business becomes really simple. That's my job, because I know the math is going to line up outside of that. So in other words, again, going back to this is, let's just say that, again, to close 1, I needed to have these numbers fall into place. What would have to happen if I wanted to close 2 then? I would need to get 4 listing agreements signed. I would need to go on 6 appointments. I would need to get 8 leads. And in order to get 8 leads, I'd have to do 200 contacts, right? So it's important to know your conversion rates, which is going to take us through the next activity here, right? So, and if you're following along this, to calculate your own, this is on page 40, right? Now, really quick, one of the questions that's on there, it says, if your conversion rate isn't where it needs to be, what can you do? Let me just ask you that. If your conversion rates aren't good, what can you do?
Script and role play.
Script and role play for sure. So again, if I get better at scripting and role playing, that could give me more leads, right? One of the things I can also do is if I'm having an issue with B, I'm not getting as many leads as I want to do. In addition to getting better at scripting and role play, I can also increase the number of contacts I make, right? So if I'm having trouble with B, I can increase, or I can script and role play. What about C? If I'm having trouble with the listing appointments, what could I do there besides script and role play? What else could I do?
Bring in another agent.
Bring in another agent. Some of us I'm not saying anybody on this call, but do we all have really good dialed in listing appointment presentations? Or are we just showing up expecting that they sign with us? Right? So getting really good at our script with the listing appointment, making sure that we're going into our listing appointment with a good presentation, and those types of things, really, really important. And then getting the appointments to actually close goes back to bulletproofing the transaction. So we can get better at all of those different things. Okay. So now if we take a look at this next game, this is a fun one. Now we're going to take a look at lead generation numbers. So this is going to tell you how many contacts you need. It'll actually show you how to calculate how many contacts you need to hit a goal. So follow along with me. And what this basically is showing is, do you have enough people in your database to actually get you the amount of business that you want to get? For some of us, we do, and we're not even scratching the surface. For some of us, we don't have enough the people that we know. So let's just pretend, for example, here, we have 900 people in our database, right? And we divide that number by 6, because we're going to just say that potentially for every 6 people that we know, we could potentially get 1 transaction out of it, which kind of goes into the MREA numbers, because the MREA always says that we get, for every 12 people that are in our database, we typically can get 2 pieces of business. I don't really like the 12 to 2 very much, because that's too big a math. So it's easier for me to follow along with 6 to 1, right? So for every person for every 6 people we have in our database, we have the ability potentially to get a conversion of 6. So basically, if we look at this, our conversion rate is about 50%, which gives us an opportunity of about 75 transactions. So if we take 900 divided by 6, and we multiply that of a conversion rate of about 50%, we have about 75% of those people that gives us the ability to do a transaction. When we look on the flip side of that, and we look at total units sold, let's just say our goal is 50, right? We got 50 units that we want to sell. We multiply now that by 6. So if we're trying to figure out how many opportunities, again, I should have explained this a little bit better. If we're looking at how many opportunities that we have out of the database that we currently have, this is the formula that you would use. You'll take the amount of people that are in your database, divide that by 6, multiply that by 50%, and that tells you how many transactions you possibly could have out of the current database that you got. So if we were to use that same number and say we have 1,000 people in our database, we have 1,000 people divided by 6 is 166.67, and then we multiply that by 50%, that gives me 83 potential opportunities. So again, that's the formula that you use if you are looking at what can I get out of the database I currently have. Now, if that number is not what you want it to be, and you want to find out how many people do I need to get in my database to hit the number that I want to hit, the second formula is what you would use, right? So let's just say that I want to get 50 units sold. So now I'm going to take the unit amount that I want to sell, which is 50. I'm going to multiply instead of divide by 6, right? And then I'm going to look at that same conversion rate. Now I'm going to divide by the conversion rate instead. We're going to divide by 0.5. And then we see that we need to have 600 in order to be able to close that. So if I wanted to do 50 deals and I didn't have 600 contacts, then I'm probably not going to hit the deal that I want to hit. Flip side of this will show us, based on our database, how many opportunities that we have. So as you guys do this activity, and I'll have you guys do this for homework so that we can kind of get moving on with this. But think about this, is do your own numbers. Do you have enough people in your database to hit your goals? Okay. So whatever your unit goal is, do you currently have enough people in your database to hit it? And if not, then we need to think about what can we do to increase the database so that we can get the transactions that we want. And I will ask you guys this, though. The second question on page 42 says, what's the most important thing you can do to get to where you want to be? I think there's really two things based off of what we're looking at here. What do you guys think? What's the most important thing you can do? What was that?
Get more leads.
Yeah, get more leads, right? I need to have enough people in my database in order for me to hit the goals that I want to hit. And then the second part of that is I actually need to follow through and contact them. Because I can go out there and do a ton of lead generation, but if I'm not willing to do the activities by following up with them, then none of these numbers are going to actually matter, right? Any questions on this? Cool. So recalibrating your numbers. Here's what you can do in Command here real fast. And I'll have you guys, if you guys use Command, if you don't use Command, that's fine. But if you use Command, let me get out of here real fast. So I want to show you guys how to do this. So one of the things that's really cool about Command that you can do is if you go into goals, right? Or I take that back into reports. So reports is basically the little graph here. We click reports. And I'll leave it at this. We'll wrap up with reports and then we'll get into the rest of this tomorrow. But if I go into reports here and I go to goals, if I go into goal setting, I hit get started. Now I can go in and say, hey, how much do you want to make? I want to make $100,000, right? How much am I going to spend to make $100,000? Let's just say I'm going to give myself a marketing budget of $1,000 a month. And then cost of sales. How much am I going to pay out? And cost of sales are basically, again, things that are only triggered when I do a transaction. So things like my cap, things like my royalty. If I'm using a TC that only I have to pay when I do an actual sale, it's not a month-to-month expense. Those are the things that we calculate in cost of sales. So let's just say, for the sake of keeping it simple, cost of sales between cap, royalty, and TC fees, let's just say that it comes out to $24,000, right? And then business makeup, I want to do 70% of my business as listings, 30% of my list is buyers, and my average commission, let's just say I make $15,000 average for a listing commission and $15,000 for a buyer commission. I can hit continue, and then I can go in here and I can use recommended rates, and recommended rates will then give me pre-established rates on conversion ratios, meaning I can convert 5% of my leads into contact. I convert 5% of my leads into appointments. I convert 75% of my appointments set into appointments kept. I convert 75% of my appointments kept into an agreement. And then I convert 75% of my agreements into a contract, right? Now, if I know my own numbers, I can override these. If I don't know my own numbers, just use the recommended rates, right? Once I'm done with that, I can click continue. And this basically tells me I need to make 136,000 in GCI in order to net my annual profit goal of 100,000, right? And these are based on the averages that I had put in there. So now what happens here is as I get through this and this recalculates or repopulates, I can see based on my commission rates, that if I want to make 136,000, I need to close 9 units, right? I live in California, commissions are pretty high. And if I have 75% of, if 25% of my closed units don't sell, or my contracts don't sell, in order to close 9, I'm going to need to get 12 under contract. And if basically 75% of my agreements go into contract, I'm going to need to get 16%, or not 16%, 16 people to sign a listing agreement or buyer broker agreement in order to get 12 under contract. And I know that if 75% of my appointments turn into agreements, I'm going to need to get about 21 appointments in order to get 16 agreements. And I know that if 75% of my appointments set actually show, in order to get 21 appointments kept, I'm going to need to set 29 appointments. And then the contacts, command's got some weird thing that's going on here. So this is basically not exactly right in terms of that. But I know that if in order for me to set 29 appointments, from my numbers, I know that, again, looking back at the conversion ratios that we did, I know that I'm going to need to get about 4% of my leads actually turn into appointments set. So now I can calculate how many contacts I have to actually make. And then again, the job becomes easy at this point, because I can go in, now that I know those numbers, and I can say, okay, hey, listen, in order for me to get 29 29 appointments set, I'm only converting about 4% of my leads into one contact. Or I know that I'm gonna need to get about 25 contacts. If I'm at 4%, in order for me to get one appointment, I'm going to need to make 25 contacts. If I need 29 contacts, then I know that I'm going to need to get 4 leads times 29. I'm going to need to get about 116 leads in order to get that many appointments. And then I know that in order to get that many leads, I'm going to need to make about 100 contacts per lead, or for every 4 leads, or 25. So I'm going to need to probably get about 2,900 contacts in order to get the amount of leads that I need to get, which will give me the amount of appointments I need to get. And then that makes, again, the process pretty simple. All right, so one day wrap up, because we're 1 minute over and I don't want to keep you guys over. I appreciate you guys sticking around. I know staying on a Zoom call for 3 hours is pretty rough. Do the homework that I asked you guys to do from those sections for the activities. Go into Command and play with the goals applet. Again, you go to reports, you go to goals, and if you haven't already done that, set those things up just so you can kind of see what your numbers need to look like in order for you to hit what you want to get to. And then what we'll get into tomorrow, we'll go into lead generation and how we can manage working our people through that part of the lead gen funnel. And then again, we'll wrap up lead generation, get into talking about how we basically can change our activities to do the things that we need to do, and then kind of putting it all into action for tomorrow. And we will be on the same link, same time tomorrow as well as for what we did today. Any questions you guys have? Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys popping in today. I'm looking forward to finishing up a lot of really good information tomorrow as we get into talking about how to actually put a lot of the shift tactics into place. Again, today was a little bit more about mindset. We got a little bit into some of the action stuff. Knowing your numbers is really important. Tomorrow, we'll really dive into the activities and the actions we can take to be able to thrive in tomorrow's market. And I apologize because I forgot, as I'm talking here, to change over from here. So I'll put my actual face back onto the screen here for you guys as well. Any questions? I do see that a couple people said originally this was scheduled to go out Tuesday and Thursday, but I have a regional leadership meeting that I have to be at on Thursday. So we did change that to tomorrow. If for some reason you got confused and you can't be here tomorrow because you thought it was going to be Thursday, we will have this recorded so that you'll have the ability to be on or to get the information. Again, so it is Wednesday, not Thursday. Same link, same time. If you can't make it on tomorrow, then we will get the recording out for you so you can get that information. Awesome. Looking forward to seeing all you guys tomorrow.
Thank you. See you.